edition of the ExPats Podcast. Long overdue. We've kept y'all waiting. We know you're sad, but here we are. I'm Josh, joined as always by my co-host.
Hey, what's up, fellas? We're glad to be back.
Oh,
I am.
hey, what's up, fellas? Nice to meet you. You're supposed to say your name.
It's
yeah.
Lucas Cobry. My bad. Coming in unprepared as usual. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you guys know who it is. I mean, come on now.
True.
It's the ExPats back at it.
You got Colby. Looking at you.
Colby. We didn't even tell Colby we were doing this.
We have one fan, and he's a
long-time viewer.
He's essentially like 15 fans combined, if you want to put it that way. Colby has a strength of 15 men just in his right bicep. So
I can't wait to see Colby. Colby's going to be fired up tomorrow night. I can guarantee that.
Colby should be a guest on the ExPats podcast at some point in time.
Open invite, buddy.
Open invite, for sure. As long as you got one zin kind of half sticking out of your upper lip, that's the only caveat. You got to have a little bit of just, blue collar Massachusetts, Rhode Island. You got to have that aesthetic going for you. So we need a trucker hat and a zin poking right out.
Little Will Campbell for the boys.
So Lucas and I have, I think, long postponed and delayed the reconvening of the ExPats podcast for several reasons, one of which is that there's just too much freaking talk in the offseason. And I think the roller coaster of emotions that the both of us have been on since the final snap in Buffalo, or I guess in New England, but against Buffalo, when we essentially resigned ourselves to taking a left tackle at 4. That was the mindset then. It's the mindset now. Now the ups and downs, the valleys, and the mountains in between have made it both enjoyable but incredibly frustrating to not only consume Patriots media, but to have to make content about it in the meantime. And we kind of decided that our opinions would probably reach a full circle moment, like they have, and I think you and me are both on the same page that we've come full circle. But all the BS in between, all the Shedeur Sanders is going to go top 3, and allegedly Travis Hunter is the one out of those, 2 positional players, non-quarterbacks, of the top 4, as they called it, but we all know Shedeur Sanders is not going top 4, that we were going to get Travis. So we talked ourselves into, for, probably about a week and a half, oh, look, Travis Hunter is going to be available, and he's the guy we would have wanted at 1, so winning that last game won't matter, and bada bing, bada boom, we got to where we needed to be. That narrative died relatively quickly. People like to talk a big game about, the Giants, or was it the Giants or the Browns sending ownership to go watch the Colorado Pro Day. That had a lot of scuttlebutt. We then went through the emotional ordeal that was the Combine and the Will Campbell conspiracy of Will Campbell does not have 33-inch arms. You and I are kind of like, well, I guess that means Armand Membu's a Patriot, or we're going to have to start talking about Tyler Warren, Jalen Walker, all these guys that I think would be nice additions, but wouldn't fill what's become clearly our most glaring need and has been for years now. That narrative died when we got Pro Day numbers, which I guess now are more trustworthy than the Combine numbers. I'd like to thank Alex Barth, who's been on the forefront of Patriots conspiracy media when it comes to the Combine being inaccurate. And honestly, given the discrepancy between all these numbers from, Senior Bowls to Pro Days, the Combine, the personal measurements, like all these things, there's such a disparity. And a lot of guys, I think, have seen potential stock and value drop based on, 3/4 of an inch, or in some radical cases, an entire inch being taken off by, the experts at the Combine, that now we no longer trust the Combine. And it seems to be kind of a consensus opinion that we're just going to pencil in Will Campbell at 33 and not really care too much, because if that 3/8 of an inch that was going to dictate drafting someone at 4 is enough to dissuade us, then maybe we have bigger organizational issues we need to iron out. So here we are, back in the saddle. All that to say is, where are you and I now with our first-round draft pick, barring, I think, an unforeseen trade, which I really don't think, based on where we're at and based on the 2 guys that are going off the board earlier that might really be trade pieces. Where do you think we go? And you and I both have the same answer, so let's get it out of the way now. But who is your 2025 first-round draft pick who on Friday morning is going to fly out like Drake May did last year, get to center, to the 50-yard line with RKK, Jonathan Kraft, and hold up that number 1 Patriots jersey with on the Jumbotron. Welcome to New England.
It's painfully obvious, which I kind of hate, but I mean, yeah, like you said, we're kind of in lockstep. I think kind of the whole ups and downs of the podcast or of the offseason had more of an effect on this guy than anybody else, which is kind of unfortunate. But I also think that's good because I kind of like that he's been scrutinized, and I liked his response throughout the whole process. And while I think everybody else was kind of up and down, I think, not to say that I've been steady, like Will Campbell's the only choice, but I don't think I was quick to jump off the boat like a lot of other people were. And so obviously, like my pick is hopefully Will Campbell. I think I love I love the impact a lot of left tackles have for their offenses, and I don't think that Will Campbell's necessarily that level of player, but I think he's definitely a positive guy that you can add into your environment. I think a lot of the buzz that you've gotten for guys like Jalen Walker, all have the same like effect as him on the team. Like he's gonna be, and maybe it's the only place where you can get that for an offense that's desperately needs a guy like that. Obviously, those are the intangibles that I'm talking about with Walker, and I think that's like a good thing to be looking for as a first year like regime. And I think it was something that we lost last year, whether it was the offsides that constantly happened that we've talked about, the fumbles with Stevenson, just the overall like not really having a plan at all last year. And I think going in and setting the tone, being like, this is what we're after right now, and having a plan. I think, not to say that it has to happen in a specific order, but I think checking boxes and making sure that you have guys that are good for the program and good for what we're trying to build is a huge thing. Not to say that any of these guys that are obviously left off this list, not named Jalen Walker, don't have that, but I think a guy like Will Campbell comes in, he sets the tone day one, and that's something I found attractive.
I first of all very prescient analysis, I think, of the Patriots situation and kind of the draft conversation. You did a beautiful job there. You and I need to have a pre-show meeting about transitions, and when I throw you the alley-oop, not for you to go and throw it back halfway down the court. It's the second time today where I set you up to be like Lucas Cobry, and then I'm like, your 2025 New England Patriot holding up that jersey is. I point to you, you go, in complete Chris Collinsworth. Now, here's a guy that's had a tough offseason. Like, you say the name, and then you go into the analysis. Yeah. You say the name. We got to get you to just come out and say Will Campbell. But you got there, and you said it, and you gave much better analysis than I could have on it. So I appreciate that. I guess the showman in me was really just hoping for a little bit more of a Braun over Jason Terry moment there with Will Campbell. But, hey, look, you and I are on the same page. And look, again, as I said, all this crap is so cyclical that during the season it's Will Campbell 1, Will Campbell 1, Will Campbell 1, Will Campbell 1, Will Campbell 1. Now, Will Campbell, for obvious reasons, and we won't say we won't point fingers, but people like us, Will Campbell didn't make it to the college football playoff. So a couple other guys, we got a few extra snaps looking into him. And then there are the guys that eventually we get their measurables and they suddenly stand out. Like, it was Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell were like the consensus guys that we were going to be picking from for months. And then suddenly these combine numbers come out, things change, and Will Campbell's still there. So that's the important part, is the consistent fact has been Will Campbell. But Kelvin Banks out, Armand Membou in, except Armand Membou's not actually a left tackle, he's a right tackle. But people think he might be able to play left tackle because, hey, some people have done it before. And look, Joe Alt did it last year, albeit from the reverse, from left to right. So, if Joe Alt can do it, Armand Membou can do it. I don't know if I buy that argument yet. I think Armand Membou's, pretty physically special and talented, and I would not be opposed to drafting him if the Patriots did trade back to like the 8 or 9 range. I don't think that's on the cards. I think New Orleans, cap hell, really weird roster turnover situation where they have a lot of old guys they don't want to commit to long term, and the Derek Carr of it all is very apparent. I don't see them trading up, especially not for Shadur Sanders if there's a chance you can get him in the 20s, which I think there is. If he falls past 21 at Pittsburgh, that's the big talking point that I'm sure everyone that's listening to this has heard before. That's kind of the benchmark there for when we're really talking about a Shadur Sanders run. Now, last year we said the same thing about Penix, albeit late 20s, early 30s. So and Bo Nix being a mid-second round pick. Those things tend to slide up when there's a quarterback involved. However, let's not act like last year is the rule, when in some cases there is no real rule. I mean, if we're going to go back to the Kenny Pickett draft, you're not taking a quarterback till the mid-teens, and it turns out to be widely intelligent from a league scouting standpoint, because none of those guys with like the first, second round grades really amount to anything. You'll have to forgive me if I don't remember if that was the Brock Purdy draft, where there essentially was like one talented quarterback, or if Brock Purdy was a draft earlier. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's just we
that's a Kenny Pickett.
We talk ourselves in circles and just go, up, down, left, right, and he's been there all along. It's it's the girl at the end of the rom-com that you try to talk yourself into this, beautiful person that doesn't treat you right, when really the somehow more beautiful person that you looked over because you're an idiot was there the whole time. And she might not have worn heels, and she might not put on the brightest red lipstick, and maybe she wears a hoodie. And that's kind of a turnoff throughout the movie because it's just your buddy. And then you realize, right now, I need a buddy. I need my lady to be my best friend. And my best friend protects my quarterback and keeps him safe. That's the hallmarks of a good relationship. It's not getting, the flighty prom queen that's going to come in and out of your life left and right, and, it causes you issues. And there isn't
– You don't need that.
And there isn't a blue chip prom queen that fills both needs. There's no Malik Neighbors this year. There's no Marvin Harrison Jr. There's not even a Roma Dunze. Probably not even a Brian Thomas Jr., if we're going to be entirely honest.
Nope.
As much as I think there are aspects to Tet and Matthew Golden's game that's intriguing. We're not at that point yet. So why is it that a team in disarray on the offensive line that's made, I think, a move for stability in the short term with Morgan Moses, I think one dart throw in Garrett Bradbury at center that is at best more consistent than what we've had, and at worst maybe Cole Strange finds a way to start, right, or Ben Brown can stick it in his place, or we go after that BC center late in the draft, and that pipeline seems to be really intriguing, and we haven't even gotten to Ozzie Trapillo yet, and some of maybe the later round tackles, because in my opinion, I don't know about you, I'm very comfortable taking 2 tackles this draft. Or
Sure.
At least 2 interior linemen, right? Like, I wouldn't mind, obviously, Will Campbell. Like, I think worst case scenario from a tackle standpoint, you either trade back and you don't get Campbell, and then you fight like hell to trade back up into the late first, early second, you get Ursary. Even if, some of these consensus big boards have him at 44, I don't know why. That's not the way left tackle works in the NFL, especially not when there isn't even enough starting caliber left tackles to fill every, like, to have one for every team in the NFL. Like, that's just how premium a position it is, and how important it is to get it right. And I think if you're in the position like we are, where it sucks that there isn't a lot of, blue chip talent, top end talent, but it's kind of liberating because we can go out in the media and we can have Elliot Wolf and Mike Vrabel do all this, guffawing about, well, like, we're not going to make the same mistakes we have. We have to go for best player available. We can't go for need. You can do both, because honestly, once you get past Hunter and Carter, it's a lot of people that you can put on a level playing field, whether or not that's Membu, Jalen Walker, Tyler Warren, who I've, at various points really liked and considered, how maybe a move to the Patriots would work out. And I don't know if you saw, but he had an interview with Tom Curran kind of talking about how he fit in. It's interesting. Whether or not, hey, even, Will Johnson, like, there's a lot of these guys that you can kind of put on, the same tier. Ranging from like pick 4 to pick like 16, right? And that means ideally you'd want to trade back, but it means that every other team is like, why would I trade up? And this is the nature of the conversation that we've had for months now. We've talked ourselves in, around, about, beyond. These are the prepositions, but we've come back here, and it's the best available is subjective. It's very subjective right now. Malik Neighbors isn't somehow sitting at pick like 6, right? That's not happening this year. So let's go for the best available player that fits our biggest need. And this is where we're at. This is Will Campbell to the New England Patriots, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And it seems to be every day I get an ESPN notification about the Patriots love Will Campbell. I could have told you that. Like, I mean, obviously him and Mike Vrabel are going to be like, bunk buddies. Like, they just seem like they are very complementary of one another from a personality standpoint, let alone, I think, the physicality with which he plays on the football field. And in short arms, you want to talk about, how fast he gets out of the sets, like what that means from a run to pass block perspective, we can have all these conversations. But at the end of the day, you're not getting a more experienced, proven, and polished tackle in this draft than Will Campbell. I honestly would rather lean into, let me bet on the guy that's a little bit of a statistical outlier from an arm length standpoint than bet on the guy that has not played any left tackle for Missouri, but suddenly we think we can switch him over. We can kick that right tackle can down the road for at least another season when you have Morgan Moses, for at least another season, maybe two if we're lucky. Because I think his leadership and just by proxy of being better than DeMontre Jacobs, like substantially better than DeMontre Jacobs, that we are in a position now where we need to devote this important asset, the 4th overall pick, in what is maybe a little bit of a downer draft. You can make that, not so splashy pick and not maybe get, blowback because, hey, Marvin Harrison was on the board. Like, what are we doing? That's not the case this year. And, that's been the nature of the conversation the entire time. And you and I have rightfully, I think, avoided feeding into a lot of the up and down narratives because when those combine numbers came out, you and I both texted like, well, the Will Campbell dream is dead. We're dead. Everything sucks. I'm sad. Yada, yada. Stuff changes, and it changes every day in the draft. And over the next, I think, 24 hours, we might get some news that is more substantiated than anything we were going to get 3 months earlier. So we'll keep our ear to the ground. We'll keep on, listening, talking, and we'll probably come back post-draft and kind of initiate some dialogue there. I also did just get a notification we're live, so might as well throw it out there. Jason Tatum is not playing game 2. That wrist injury that people were questioning, that hurts. I still think we can pull up the dub, though. Them boys.
No, they've been hooping, man.
Derek White is my favorite Celtic dude. I love Derek White.
Maybe of my lifetime, not gonna lie. Most underrated, potentially, not gonna lie.
Dude, I would argue that Derek White being out is more detrimental to an immediate playoff, winning a playoff game is more detrimental than Jaylen Brown being out. And I can say that because I've seen Jaylen Brown being out for the last 3 weeks, and I've seen what Derek White's done in that time and just what he adds on both sides of the floor. And I think the consistency shooting from deep is important. Obviously, Jaylen Brown is a top 20 player in the NBA, and that's no disrespect to him whatsoever. But for the way the Celtics team plays, Derek White is so important. He's at the heart of everything, and it kind of allows Drew Holiday to potentially devote more energy on the defensive side of the ball. So can't say enough good things about him. Maybe that's enough for the Celtics Sports Minute here. But yeah, I know I kind of just grandstanded a bit, talked forever about Will Campbell and kind of all the crap surrounding the draft. But do you have anything else to add before maybe we kind of discuss other areas of need? I think you and I might have a little bit of philosophical differences about some things, but largely we know what we need, right? We do know what we need from a roster standpoint.
No, I think something that we didn't really get the chance to comment on was a lot of the free agent moves, and I think they did a great job plugging up a lot of holes with obviously we coming into the offseason we needed both tackles. At one point I was convinced we needed all 5 or all I wasn't even sure about it at one point. And now we have at least dart throws at center, like you said. I mean, I'm willing to stick in. I'm confident that between the three of what's his face, Bradbury, Strange, and Ben Brown, that we'll have something that'll be competent. But I think left tackle, left guard are definitely still in the conversation for what you want to do with these later. I'm willing to go earlier than I think a lot of people on guard, just because I think having a good offensive line is just as important, because I'd rather be trying to make a move, like a splash move next year with a guy who's established as a receiver, because I don't think that I don't even think really Ted McMillan is a guy that, or Luther, Luther Burden's interesting, but I don't think he's necessarily a guy that you can be like, bang, okay, receiver problem's fixed for now. Him, Diggs, and like a couple others. So it's interesting to me. I think something that my buddy, the guy I worked with over the summer, he's a big Giant fan, and he constantly was saying that at one point we were talking about the draft, and he goes, "I'm glad that you can feel how I felt last year." And like you said, there's no Malik Neighbors in this draft. Like, granted, he misses out on Drake May, but I would take a number one receiver who's going to be a number one receiver for the next 5 years, bare minimum, and he could potentially be the best receiver in the league if he ever gets a quarterback. Kyle, if you see this, please know that I would still take Drake May in a heartbeat. But
I also don't understand what he's saying by that, because that was a loaded draft, so they couldn't get the quarterback, but they got a generational talent. We're in a position which is kind of better than they are last year, where we have the quarterback. Us not being able to take generational talent sucks, but I'd much rather be in the position we're in than the Giants are in, where Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston, as much as I, admire those guys for their careers, I don't know what the hell they're doing. And I don't see Joe Shane's job being kept for much longer, I'll put it that way.
Well, the thing is, I really do like Dable, because I think that one playoff run that they had is, a coaching masterclass. He takes a bunch of nobodies, not named Saquon Barkley, and they beat a very good, NFC North winning team in that first round of the playoffs, which is really cool to watch. You cannot throw the ball further than 5 feet with Daniel Jones, which is unfortunate, but that's the world we live in.
He was like a borderline Pro Bowler during that postseason run that you're talking about, and it's like I put that entirely on the shoulders of Brian Dable, as you're saying.
Exactly. So I'm curious to see how it all shakes out. I think we're locked in at Will Campbell, but I don't think a trade up is necessarily out of the imagination, just because like we said, there are some, especially if the board shakes out where it's like somehow God has blessed all of New England and we've been able to acquire Travis Hunter in some way, or like even Abdul Carter. I think he's just so good that you can't pass on. I'm not the only one I know saying that, but like if you have to go up, and this is kind of funny. This might show how little research that I've truly done, but up until today I really did think Josh Connerly was white. I don't know why. I'd seen clips of him playing, but the man is like dark black, and I know, no disrespect, but I've seen, maybe it's just I'm thinking of the Oregon uniform, but like I felt like I was like, this is Josh Connerly, but
Josh Connerly Jr. is a white ass name, if we're being honest.
Thank you. That's
it's like it's 1 degree of separation away from my name, and I think I could burn underneath a freaking lamp. So I don't blame you for making that assumption.
The question is, could you play left tackle for the New England Patriots?
Could you play left tackle for the New England Patriots? And I think Will Campbell can.
No, I think he can.
Yeah, that season, I'm still looking at this Daniel Jones thing because, again, I shout all over Joe Schoen, and I don't envy the position the Giants are in or Dable's in. But I have a lot of respect for him because that 2022 season got him a 4-year, $160 million contract, and he became the first player in NFL history to throw for 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 70 rushing yards in a playoff game against the Vikings in a wild card round. So it shows, I think, how important having a offensive coach really is, a successful one in the building. And I think that while maybe not as modern and inventive in some ways as a Ben Johnson or as a Brian Dable or maybe even as a Liam Cohn, I think that what you get in terms of, malleability, intelligence in a McDaniels offense, I think all of these things are important. And I think that, it frees us up in the coming months. And unless we really make a trade, I know I've rang the A.J. Brown, bell months ago. I lit the fires of Rohan for A.J. Brown. And I think, it was a fun talking point in the moment. And I knew that it wasn't. Yeah, you're right. Wait, but isn't it Rohan? No, you're right. Thank you. Damn. But yeah, no, I don't see that happening at the moment. Especially not if we're trying to dole out this year's picks in the NFL draft. I think next year's is interesting. I still think we'll have some salary cap next year, and let's just say we put together a 9+ win season, which honestly, looking at our schedule, there's a lot of gettable games. So many. I do think we're at the point now where, I was saying, we needed a real overhaul of our receiver room, and I'm really still not confident in it, to be honest with you, especially Diggs being on the path to recovery. I really don't know. And you and I have had epic debates about Kayshon Boutte, but like it or not, he might be on the trade block, given what NFL insiders are saying. And I don't even necessarily want that to be the case right now. I'd much rather, as we, I think, concurred on, but Bourne would be the odd man out for us, both based on age and skill and, I think, injury history. But we'll start having, I think, more concrete conversations about, I think, an external, X wide receiver. But, we don't have to waste much time talking about getting a receiver, because I really think that by 38, whether or not you want to trade up or trade into the late second round. Like, there are guys on the board that are going to be interesting, and I think it's kind of highlighted by, the Jaden Higgins or the Jalen Noel. Not to go Iowa State on Iowa State 1 and 2, but I think these are guys that, pose an interesting question to, the balance of the Patriots wide receiver room, where we go. I think you and I both like Higgins as more of like a physical or just a bigger guy. I think having someone that can line up on the outside is just really important. And that's not something that we've had for the New England Patriots. And I think any sort of meaningfully, like, I think Booty's got nice, like, size to him, but he's still compact and he's not, like, tall. So we need someone with catch radius. And that's something that Mike Vrabel, like, repeated, in interviews, like, post-hiring. And I think we, for a minute there, we're like, man, he's saying either Tet or T. Now, Tet's a reach, and frankly, it's just, no matter how much little faith I have in this Patriots offense, or in the receiving room, I have less in Vidarian Lowe and DeMontre Jacobs. So if we're changing that to Will Campbell and Morgan Moses, that is better than any upgrade I think we could have made at receiver, both through the draft and through trades and free agency. Like, it's the nature of skill players not being available in free agency that much, and it's the nature of a lot of guys are kind of in weird, not yet going into a contract year, so it's hard to trade for them. And if there's a guy like that that's available, the best you're going to get is a George Pickens, and there's character concerns there, locker room concerns. I think as much as I don't mind having a fiery personality, I think Diggs kind of embodies that well versus someone like Pickens that might just be a head case. And like, it's not so much like him being frustrated on a sideline as much as it's like he might take off his helmet and try beating an opposing corner with it. And then you got a guy ejected, and you just, a first down turns into, like, first and 30 or something crazy. I don't know. But the moral of the story is we're at a really weird spot in terms of acquiring talent in the league. And we just got to kind of take what's there. And what's there might be a second-round receiver. So I'm more than happy to go through, I think, some of these guys. That could be maybe – if you really want to trade up into the first, Matthew Golden's not going to be there. If the questions around Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka, I'm willing to have those, because I know you said Luther Burden doesn't come in and fix things, but I think it helps a whole lot. And if that does happen to fall, he's a guy where I think the character concerns are a little more overblown, and I think they're more like – I think he's more – and I'm not saying he is this player, but I think those concerns are more rooted in, like, similar Stephon Diggs stuff than I would say they're rooted in, like, George Pickens, violence, murder stuff,
No, I agree.
And I could be wrong about that. I don't know. But, I mean, he came in as the number one receiver heading into this year in college football in terms of draft talk, performance, potential Heisman candidacy. And it was Brady Cook took a real step back in that Missouri offense. And, so I'm not willing to throw him out just yet. And I really don't mind I don't mind the idea of buying low on a guy that maybe didn't perform partially due to team, I think, issues, which happens a lot in college football. You can argue it kind of happened to Will Campbell going from a Heisman Trophy winning season to one of the best receiving corps in football to what we saw this year from a Garrett Nussmeier led team. I cannot stress enough how big a drop off there is from Jaden Daniels to Garrett Nussmeier. Not just because we played against both in college football 25, which you and I play frequently together, and we can see physically how much it changes, but just from the tape, and going from who has become arguably the best rookie in NFL history to a guy that, if he gets drafted, it's not ever going to be the indication that he's going to start in the NFL ever. For a competent franchise. Let me put it that way.
Well, and the whole thing with a guy having an off year, I mean, that both of your two studs in the past 2 years, Gonzalez and freaking Drake May. Drake May is, he gets drafted off a year-old tape, basically, at 3 overall. I mean, if you want to go and you believe that you can get a guy like Luther, I think Emeka Egbuka is a technician, and I think there's space on our team for a guy like that. But I don't think it's the same explosivity. And we were talking before the show. about. I mean, you enjoy watching run after catch a lot more than I do.
Well, I just
You
think
would.
it's been important to the Patriots' success for the last 20 years. Like, those are the
I
guys.
completely agree.
It's not the down. Like, Randy Moss is an outlier for the Patriots, and
No, and I
in Josh
think
McDaniels' offense in particular, guys like Amendola and Edelman were engines that carried us through playoff runs.
no, for sure, and I think a guy like Burden compared to, I mean, I think Burden and Booty are similar sized. I think Booty, but I think they have different skill sets. And to say that, I think if you were to put Burden in place of Pop, I think that's a massive upgrade in this, way more than like. I think Jaden Higgins is a much better player than Booty, but I don't think it's that big of a. I think you can use. I think you can use a guy like Burden, who can actually he's somebody you can scheme for rather than like acknowledge that we're not going to be scheming the way for Booty, even if he was good. But I don't think you're going to be able to open up Higgins either in the same degree. I think your spotlight still is on Diggs, and I'd rather have Diggs and Burden. But here's a guy in the chat, right? This is Bobley in the chat who said, if Hunter and Carter are off the board, I would rather they trade down a few picks and draft Warren. Adds another big target for May, and then use those other picks to maneuver around the draft and find that left tackle. My whole thing with that is just like, I don't think anybody's coming up to 4. Like I don't think it's worth it. I think if your goal is to still draft Will Campbell, like it's the whole thing where it's just like, what's that say to Will Campbell? I think he's worth the 4th overall pick because just how bad we are at left tackle. But I also don't think that they're starting level. Like it's the old thing. I mean, sorry if you guys don't watch Patriots Unfiltered. That's our show. Like you can watch whatever show you want. But the truth of the matter is that there are no guys outside the top 30 realistically. I don't think that's out of the care. Like I think 6 tackles could go in the first round, and I would not be surprised at all.
Well, yeah, look. There was a time when I kind of liked that argument, but that was like, especially the Tyler Warren one. I get where this dude's coming from, especially as a Patriots fan. It's kind of like my desire to have some of those shifty guys that can get some yak and separation. Like I think Matthew Golden would fit well, and I agree where Luther Burden would essentially be a pop upgrade, and it might be not quite apples to oranges or apples to apples to say that, well, the difference between those two players is greater than the difference between Booty and Higgins. It's like, yeah, but you're also going with a guy that was coming into the year as the number 1 receiver versus a guy that just kind of like, those aren't equivalent prospects. So obviously the gap might be different, but it's largely because of, I think, the skill level and how much Burden maybe performed at a college level. And we're getting a lot of noise that Burden might fall out of the first round, which I think might be a little overblown. And I think Golden stock might have risen a lot. But from a Will Campbell standpoint, we can't do what we did last year. And what we did last year was expect that late first round, early second round tackle kind of void to be filled. And when you take a quarterback, you're not able to address any of the other sort of offensive skill position or premium player needs. And that's okay. It's okay when you can take Drake May. That's totally fine. But we're not coming away from this draft trading down, getting Tyler Warren, and I think really servicing our tackle needs. Because, like,
not at all.
Because in theory, you get assets for that Tyler Warren, and you trade back up into the first, and you get Ursary. We come away with Ursary and Warren. I'm not mad. I don't think you're mad. I don't think a lot of people are mad. I just don't think it's possible right now. Like, again, we talked earlier in the show about how essentially once you get past Carter, because I think, Travis Hunter to the Browns seems to be a consensus now for what it's worth. From like 4 to 15, as we said, like you're going with a lot of guys that have similar grades and values. So when you're doing that, you go after the one that is the most desperate need for your team. And every other team is thinking that way. And not many of them, unless for some reason they think they need to trade up to get Ashton Genty, which I'm not sure. People that think Genty's going to Jacksonville, I don't see it. I don't think you can waste a first round pick on ETN a few years ago like they did and have a guy like Tank Bigsby perform well this year and waste a top 5 pick on a running back. That's ludicrous to me. And I think similarly, a lot of teams are thinking, I'm going to stick here and I'm just going to wait for Tyler Warren, or I'm going to wait for Armand Membu, or maybe, later on, I'm going to wait for Kelvin Banks. And I don't think a lot of these guys are incentivized to trade up once Carter and Hunter are off the board. And I know this might be me leaning into more of like a nerdy analytical side of things, but I don't, as much as I put value in Ashton Genty, the player, I don't put positional value in running back nearly enough to where I think a team is going to make a mistake and trade us enough value to move off of what is the best tackle in the draft. I just don't think that's going to happen. As much as I appreciate Bob Lee's sentiment, because I think it's rooted in like an honest desire to help the team, it's not situationally possible for us right now, barring a miracle. And I'm willing to be wrong because I'd like to be wrong. I would very much like to be wrong on this front. I just think, having consumed as much media as we have, we're not, grassroots journalists, so we're not going to, pose as people that have eyes and ears in the building. But there's only so much you can hear consistently. A lot of the other stuff that comes and it goes, you can let fall by the wayside. But there's only so much consistent talk you can hear about how little trade up value there is in the market for the draft this year, especially when there's kind of a talent level off. It's wishful thinking and borderline ignorance to just put your faith in hoping to move back and take Tyler Warren. Because if you have that much faith in Tyler Warren, take him at 4. You can watch Drake May and Ramondre Stevenson get smoked. But essentially, that's kind of like the argument you make. And I just don't. We need to take the medicine. Like I said, you need to go with the girl that was in front of you the whole time. Because Simmons, blown out leg, as much as that talent might have been there and he might have been the top tackle in the draft, we can't afford to draft a guy that might not play consistently till November right now. Unless you want to go real crazy, I would say, and this has been another one of my potential preferences, you take that tackle early, maybe you trade up and you take another one to have someone study behind Morgan Moses. I'm not even opposed to that if we take 2 tackles, 1 and 2 with our first 2 picks. I'm not opposed to that. I think I'd rather go the Higgins route, or even if you want to make an argument, trade back up into the second at some point in time and maybe take a running back. I don't mind getting a change of pace back, because we saw, I think, with a more competent offensive line, we're kind of in one-trick pony territory with Ramondre Stevenson. And we didn't use Gibson nearly enough towards the end of the year, so maybe we have a more concrete plan for him and we can actually attack that properly. But I'm thinking that's not even a bad look either. But it starts and it ends with tackle this draft. That's the most important thing you can come away with, because it's been the most glaring need for, since 2018, right? Yeah. So let's not kid ourselves. Let's not kid ourselves. Let's not try to do Eastern medicine like we've been trying to do and, put on like a eucalyptus leaf on the left tackle line and think that it's magically going to cure us of hepatitis or something. You got to take the fucking medicine. I swore. Anyway, you gotta get your shots. All right, you gotta get your tuberculosis vaccination, and that's what it is to get Will Campbell in the mix. There's no one offensive skill set player that can do that for you this year in this draft. There just isn't one outside of Travis Hunter. There is not. I don't see
even Travis Hunter is not going to fix all these problems.
Even then, yes, but I still that's the guy where I'm like, all right, well, there's also a shot you're taking when you're doing that too. It might be a shot of tequila, and it's a fun time, but it's kind of a different conversation. But I appreciate someone writing in and having a comment, and I appreciate the sentiment of it.
Well, his whole premise of it basically starts with if Hunter and Carter are off the board. And if you are trading that pick, it's essentially with the assumption that somebody's going to try and move up to take Genty. And like you said, it's crazy. And so a guy named Will in the chat, whoever the heck is, agreed that it is crazy if you want Genty. And I think I don't think there's a world in which a running back can be that good. And I think he's a talented player, and I think he's a thumper, and I think there's something to be said that he probably is a Vrabel guy who wants to just set the edge and have that great running back part two. But he's not Derrick Henry. He's 6 inches shorter than Derrick Henry and probably 40 pounds lighter. And Derrick Henry's a generational talent rather than the average top 5 pick. And not to say that McCaffrey wouldn't be the pick right now either, but even him, I'd be like, I don't know. I mean, he's probably such a weapon that you probably have to take him over Campbell. But I don't think Genty is that same level of weapon. I think you add him to Ramondre and it's that same one-trick pony. Whereas
that's the argument for the Patriots, where I'm like, I kind of almost want a more diversified skill set there, because then I think we have an asset in Ramondre that we're just discarding. Which, for a running back aging into their late 20s, I don't think it's necessarily it's a blueprint that's worked for a lot of teams. But I don't think it's crazy to want Genty. Like I actually there's an argument to be made, and a lot of people have started making it that he's the third best player in this draft. And I think there's the there's the stats to prove it. There's the eye test. There's a lot of the measurables outside of, as you mentioned, him being on the shorter side. It's crazy to trade valuable assets, particularly if you're going to talk about like next year's picks or 2027 picks. Like it's crazy to do that for a running back right now. I don't see the value in it. And if we see it happen, we're not saying it won't, but I'm going to say watch that team in 4 years. Where are they going to be at? Because trading up for a running back in the top 10 picks is not a recipe for success. If you want to do it in the second round or the third, and you're going after a guy like Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Dylan Sampson, I am all ears for that. I don't think that's unintelligent because you're just probably giving up picking the 150s to you're talking about more less consequential picks in the draft. It's crazy to do it in the top 5. That it just there's so much value in the picks you hold in early rounds, whether or not be in the second and first round, to trade it for a running back, especially for a lot of these teams that just don't they need to invest more in the protection of that running back and quarterback. Jacksonville really needs to bolster that line. I think they have enough in the running back room right now to where it'd be silly to invest in that. I think the Raiders sticking and picking Ashton Genty, I don't think it's crazy, and I think that's honestly the most likely scenario because their run by committee last year was horrendous. It was so bad, dude. I don't know if you got burned, but I drafted Zamir White in a week or two. Ouch. And then, you have like a week or two from Sincere McCormick and a couple of these other scrubs that come in and, have like 30-yard game. It was brutal watching that rushing attack last year. Just terrible. So that's a team where I'm like, look, third best player in the draft. Maybe you're not in love with taking a guy like Membu. If they can work out those contract issues with Colt Miller, which has been, the newest talking point, I don't think that affects the Patriots. I think people thinking it affects the Patriots from maybe he's available or maybe they want to trade up to secure having a tackle. Not going to happen because they can just take Membu.
And so some of the weird viewers is commenting and saying imagine it should be Warren that you trade up, or it should be Shedeur, not Warren, that people want to trade up for. And I was just like, I don't. This guy's now he's talking crazy. He's saying that we should trade May away to get Shedeur. This guy's insane. But no,
his December Nick Wright shit.
No, literally, yeah. And it's crazy to say that somebody actually said that May would be the number 1 overall. Run the card up. This is not even a joke in this draft. We got so lucky last year.
Not even that close. And I actually like Cam Ward more than I think. I think some of the conversations comparing this year to last year is a little unfair because there's just a lot of high performance quarterbacks in last year's draft in college football.
Oh, yeah.
There were some real studs, and you don't get that very often. So it's great that you can be the third pick and still get what is a number 1 quarterback in any other draft year. We lucked out, and that luck didn't extend to this year in terms of getting maybe that same value at the 4th overall pick. There's not a Joe Alt, right? But I don't find Campbell to be egregiously off that mark.
No, I don't either.
But I'm not going to entertain any sort of conversation where we're comparing Shedeur Sanders and Drake May because physically they're not even remotely close. Arm talent, it's just night and day. And honestly, if you want to say a lot of what made Shedeur great was some of that, maybe he wasn't throwing as many ill-fated balls as Drake May in college. I think he kind of like Drake didn't have the best offensive line at times. They got a lot better this year because last year was brutal. But I still think as a decision maker, I don't even put I'm not comparing Drake and Shedeur like that really. And some of the physical, intuitive things that Drake does, I know that Pop Douglas flip touchdown pass is something that a lot of I'm just going back and watching Drake May highlights. It's some of the things he does. It's you are a high IQ ball player. It's not just Daniel Jones. You're not just a freak specimen you created in Madden with no head on his shoulders. Drake May is a smart dude, and I think put him in a competent offensive scheme, which last year, just the Mayo and Van Pelt and Covington combination was probably the worst coaching staff in football. And you go and you take a proven coach of the year that has, I think, transformed the Titans organization, and it's crumbled without him. Offensive coordinator that has coached the greatest tight end and quarterback of all time and has consistently managed to play to the strengths of the team, or at least play away from the weaknesses, which is what we saw in 2021, where Mac Jones was a Pro Bowler and got 10 wins. Like I'd like to think Josh McDaniels had a lot to do with that. And obviously, Bill Belichick on the defensive side of the ball. But it's like, and again, it's maybe a little more of an unknown. I still like Terrell Williams. Like I think that the entire staff has been, it's been an upheaval and it's been a good change. And I like the idea that Vrabel and Cowden probably have a 2-1 say over Wolf. So there kind of has to be a lot more collaboration there. And I'm not ready to completely give up on Elliott Wolf yet, just because I know that he's highly regarded. So let's just kind of give it some time and let Drake work with Josh for a while. And I think within about 2 weeks into the NFL season, anyone that made that comment, whether or not in jest about like Shedeur being better than Drake May, will go out the window. And that includes Nick Wright, who had the audacity to say it live on television.
No, yeah, I couldn't agree more. There was a clip. I mean, I say there's a clip before Drake gets injured in that Jets game. He takes off with that run and just houses it. Runs past 3 guys. I mean, he's beating angles on that play. He's fast enough to be a star in this league and big enough, and he's got the arm talent. He's like you said, he's a smart player. I don't think there's a single player that you wouldn't even, if I was the number 1 pick in this draft and I'm in the Titans' shoes and Drake May's in this. There's you couldn't offer me a big enough package to move back, and his value goes up so much in this draft. Drake May is
because there's no Caleb Williams next year. That we know of, right? Like the conversation 3 years ago was, where's Arch Manning at this point in time? I don't think there's enough sample size to like confidently take an Arch Manning. Like Drake May is probably for the next 2.5, like that's the best quarterback prospect you could get. It just so happens that there were 2 pretty much on the same level as him, and you can argue better and from their college tape. I think from a physical standpoint, actually like him more than Caleb Williams. You can make an argument that Jaden Daniels is the best player in the class based off last year's performance and the Heisman, and I think that's a very intelligent take you can make. Now, whether or not he has the durability that I think Drake might possess, I'm worried. Like I watched a whole 30-minute video last night about how the Colts have mismanaged quarterbacks since about 2011, and it was partially kind of like football porn for me because I absolutely despise the Indianapolis Colts, and I think they're run by a little bitch in Jim Irsay, and I don't necessarily value. I'm forgetting his name now, but the Ballard, right, the GM. He's kind of a lot of talk, and at least he's admitted when he's failed. But it was wild to watch that happen, and to watch, like I don't think we realize the accumulation of physical abuse that Andrew, and this is a lesson for Patriots fans, I think, but the physical abuse Andrew Luck took over time, like having like a torn labrum, having ribs broken, crunched on the same plays where he also gets like lung damage or something. Like the amount of hits that bit, like as physical as he was, like that's not, for quarterbacks, that's not like really the kind of violence you're supposed to be subjected to on a weekly basis. And they didn't get Andrew Luck's offensive line right till his last year in the NFL. And after that, his body was still so beat up, he retired. And it was hard for a lot of people to get it in the moment, but you don't understand how much, like, you know, when you're tearing throwing shoulders or you're constantly getting hit, you're getting concussed, lower body, your midsection, upper, like that weighs. So that for me is like, when I see a guy like that, that's bigger, that can extend plays, and while maybe not as athletic as Drake, I think takes a similar beating, my immediate thought is like, all right, watching that video, if anything, reinforced my desire for Will Campbell at 4, because, you know, the Quentin Nelsons and all that was nice, but they took too long to do it. You can't take a quarterback in 2012 and have a fully formed offensive line in 2018. We've seen what that does to a generational quarterback talent that was challenging Tom Brady in AFC Championship games and taking a lackluster roster, which good quarterbacks can do, farther in the playoffs than they should. You can make an argument Jaden Daniels did that last year. And why was he able to do that? Because even if it wasn't the most splashy signings, the Commanders committed both finances, resources, and obviously coaching to putting out a product on the field from an offensive line standpoint that was serviceable. And that's not something the Patriots have had for years. And like, let's let's not risk the health and future of our franchise, because you have the potential to win meaningful playoff games with Drake May as a quarterback. And the more you subject him to beatings, the smaller that window becomes, and maybe the more premature his career ending could be. So let's really value that and take it seriously, even though it's hard, because we're seeing everyone lap us in skill position players, and I get it. I get it.
No, a young man named Belong agrees with you. He says any talk other than Campbell is insane at this point, and I agree with him. I think it's not at the point where it was Drake May, and there's no point in even entertaining other offers unless they're offered literally a king's ransom. But I don't think you're getting a pick or any offer that's actually worth anything to move back. I don't think there's any. We've said it 100 times, and I think there's no point in anybody moving back, and you can just wait for these guys to come to you, and you'll take your pick of the litter, and hopefully it matches up with what you need. But as the first pick in that pick of the litter, I mean, it kind of sucks, but let's go with the one at the biggest hole and potentially the most important position on the offensive side of the ball, other than quarterback, and it doesn't get talked about enough. But I think in that Jaden Daniels light with Cliff Kingsbury, I think that's an offensive coordinator who can dial up exactly what Jaden Daniels needs. And I think hopefully maybe this is me just having been long enough down this road and I can just put myself behind anything. I think a modern Josh McDaniels offense is exactly what Drake May needs. I think it's attacking that interior part of the field. I think it's relying on the guys that you have. I think it's great for not having good receivers, not having a great offensive line. And it really goes into that whole, I mean, maybe that's just the Brady effect of it all, but I don't think the Raiders had any particular, Devontae Adams is unbelievable. Let's not say that. But outside of that, he had DT in Denver too, but I think he can cover up some spots that left guard. I don't think that's necessarily the biggest piece in a Josh McDaniels offense, especially if he's picking up the options that he hopefully will.
It's important in the Josh McDaniel offense in years past to have size there, and that's not something you're provided with Cole Strange, which is I think why so much of the Cole Strange moving to center conversation is kind of, I guess, sparked a lot of debate. But I think that's more likely than him sticking at left guard. I think. To reiterate what a lot of the other pundits have said, we might be looking at City So revival project, which I'm not totally against. I don't if he couldn't get on the field last year, it might be naive to just be he could be a starting left guard this year. So let's wait and see on that front. But it's still it's still an important need. But yeah, totally let's hammer that tackle spot home. We spent the better part of an hour talking about it, so maybe it's time to. We talked a little bit about that, Jalen Higgins. But if you want to go into some other sleeper positions that I think the roster could benefit from having a little bit of an injection to, I'm happy to hear kind of your thoughts on that, my thoughts on that, and just maybe some guys to be on the lookout for. Probably day 2 more than anything, because day 1 it's probably going to be within the first 40 minutes. Most likely, we know what we're going to get. I don't, as much as I like to speculate about trading back up in the first, I'm not sure that's by any means a certainty. I don't think anyone would argue that.
No, yeah, it's nice. I don't like predicting trades because I think it relies too much on predicting what another team needs, and I don't think you can do that without actually being in the room or talking to somebody. I don't know what the Bills or the Rams need or whatever to the point where I could be all right, if I offer you this spot, you'll be able to get this guy. And I think that's a lot of, particularly with this draft, where it's there's not enough really good guys to be predicting the fact that I think whatever. Basically, I think if they can get that free safety that complements well with a Peppers and a Duggar and allows them to move up and play in maybe that slot corner role, but it's really a big nickel to have that heavier personnel on the field when you need it in the middle of the field. I think that's huge for this defense. Edge is obviously a deep class for this, but we talked about it a little bit before. I don't know if that's necessarily the biggest need considering what we did in the offseason and what we already have on the roster. I think receiver and left guard, assuming that you get Will Campbell, I think those are the two ones that you're really trying to plug. I think a guy like Higgins is definitely a big, just looking at the desirables and what you can get in a physical perspective. I think that's huge. A guy that I really like is definitely moved up the board is Kyle Williams. I think he's just that explosive run after the catch, and I think he's a little bit of a project, which I really appreciate. Like I think Drake May in that similar light. I think if you let him learn from Diggs a little bit and you let him pick up, I think he could be a great route runner.
You got A.O. Manor if you're looking for a little bit of size on the outside as well. Stanford.
Exactly.
That might be a guy that falls to 38. So keep a lookout for A.O. Manor. I think that's picked up a little more steam in the past couple months, but I don't. From a Patriots standpoint, I don't know. But from a potential size addition to the roster, that's definitely something we can look at. I wouldn't look at Jalen Royals. Kyle Williams, as you said, he might be undersized, but I think that's a guy that's jittery, got a little bit of that bug in him, could be interesting. Trey Harris is another one that, like, if we're going to talk about early third round, if a couple guys fall, Trey Harris is one of those bigger bodied guys that I think could really be a valuable addition, as people like to say, be that guy on the outside in a McDaniels offense that, if anything, just draws bodies to him. And I think in that same range, you were talking about free safety, and you know how much this has been something I've been kind of banging the table for. That's around Andrew Makuba, Nick Emmanwori range. I think Makuba is probably the more polished of those two prospects. I'll read you a little bit of what PFF has to say about Emmanwori, because I think it's interesting. Because while mildly concerning, it's also like looking at our roster, seeing what our needs are. It's, I think, more of like a flyer you can take being the Patriots. It's kind of like how you can say some of these guys late in the first round, like the Chiefs and Eagles, can afford to take a Josh Simmons, right? Because he's someone that's injured, but they're not necessarily needing to immediately fill a hole at tackle, or they're not kind of in a position where they need to, have an immediate impact from a guy that's, putting forth starts week one. And we could kind of be in that position when it comes to safety, early third round, right? So Emmanwori, we're talking about him. Quote from PFF: elite athleticism and playmaking ability suggests his ceiling should be on par with someone like Kirby Joseph, but he has underwhelming box play and questionable technique. Do you know what really doesn't concern me if we're looking for a pure free safety is box play, and to a lesser extent technique, which I still, it's still important. But we have the box safety / linebackers. For me, the reason why free safety is so, I think, paramount is because, to me, Duggar's really like a hybrid linebacker. And to some extent, Peppers, obviously, he came in the league as a safety. But these are guys that are playing, like, up at the line and getting physical with you and are providing support in the run game, especially. Whereas I think, as we talked about off air, given how I think structurally sound the interior of our offensive line is, and I know a lot of guys think we're going to line up kind of in this, like, set where you're going to have Williams, Barmore, and Keon White out there. I don't know. I think I'm still very much of the opinion that in the third round, if you can, or late second, get a guy like Jack Sawyer, maybe get some edge guys like that can potentially unlock Keon White to be like I think I called him Milton Williams Jr. I mean, Milton Williams himself even said on the Greenlight Pod, talking about how he sees a lot of himself in Keon White and that those are dogs, and if they line up on the same side, it's going to get violent, what have you. That's cool. I really do think that he can be like a maybe even sub 50% usage rate, but really get the most out of his pressures, because Barmore needs to come out, hasn't played in 2 years. You throw in Milton Williams next to Keon White. Like, Keon White has proven to be a disruptor from the interior and to be a little technically lost when he's playing on the edge. So I think our interior is sound. This is why, for me, Mason Graham would probably be one of the more head-scratching picks the Patriots could make for that very reason. Is I do think we might be 3 deep in the interior. Whether or not we have the luxury to play Keon as a third D tackle, I don't know, and he might just be an edge by the nature of kind of maybe some of our roster limitations. But you want to talk about things we didn't have last year, or coverage sacks, because you didn't have anyone collapsing the pocket from the interior with Barmore out, and obviously some of those older guys like Godshaw kind of having a different role in the team, and while maybe from a 2-gap run stopping standpoint they provided a service for a long period of time, I'm still not relying on any sort of pass rush or pressures, But I think when you have CD on one end, CG on the other, talking about Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez, and maybe we figure out if you want to draft an Elijah Huzzie, get a third corner later in the draft, or maybe try to convert a guy to being a free safety, like what we try to do with Jonathan Jones, albeit probably too late in his career for it to really be impactful at this point in time. Like, the only way I don't see us getting coverage sacks, because we're not going to necessarily have the strongest edge rush. I mean, you might get a couple decent plays from Harold Landry a game out that way, but I don't think that's really going to translate into sacks. Like, I think you get that by just ironing out that McCourty-sized hole in the secondary that is kind of plagued us, because there's only so long Gonzo can follow a guy, shadow a guy, before it's like, all right, A, you need safety help, but B, you need to get pressure on the quarterback. And we're going to have some more pressure this year. It's going to be scary for interior offensive lines going forward, and that excites me. But if we're able to just fill that need over top, whether or not that be with a guy like an Emin Wari and Andrew Makuba, who I think is a lot of guys have talked about going to the Patriots potentially, whether or not that's something that comes to fruition. As much as I would love to talk about Jonas Saker, I think that's more of another one of those like physical guys that fits into a Kyle Duggar mold maybe. And as much as I'd love to have a UVA guy, a fellow alum on the Patriots, I just don't see it happening at this point in time. Maybe we go with a Billy Bowman, who's better in coverage, unlike a Duggar, but isn't maybe as much of a pure tackler and doesn't have that form down. But you can work with that as long as you're getting bodies out there. But the bodies weren't coming from a free safety standpoint for a long time. So, not to just talk about safety that long, because there might be other needs like left guard. If you want to talk about maybe going back-to-back line, you take a Tyler Booker early in the second round, get a guy from a program like that just knows how to eat space. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of options here to fill, I think, holes without having like all-pro caliber players just flood in. Like, that's not necessarily what you need right now before I make some of these splash moves.
Set the foundation. I think that's a big thing, and I don't think we have. Right now, we're just a hole in the ground, man. I mean, that's the big problem. I think something that is attractive about the free safety position is that it allows you to. I think with the nature of two gapping, you're going to be one high a lot, and I think that free safety role weirdly is going to be more important. And I don't think you have anybody that's truly that talented at that position. I don't think it's that hard. This is terrible, and I could never play this position. But in the grand scheme of NFL rosters positions, I don't think free safety. I think it's the same thing with guard. I don't think they're. I think there are a lot of guys that can do it at an okay level, and like we're saying with the foundational pieces, I think a lot of guys are. I don't know how often you're playing one high safety to the point where you need a guy whose designated role is to do that. Obviously, it didn't work when we were getting just toasted this year, and obviously we didn't have any pressure at all at any part of this. But with Milton Williams and maybe Christian Barmore is like half the player he was 2 years ago. I think you get more, and I think you have a lot of experience, and I think hopefully these guys are better at scheming up. I mean, I know last year you were calling for a lot of exotic pressures, and like they would give them to you, but I don't know how often they were really game in and game out coming up with a plan that genuinely comes back and rips this. One of our fans is asking whose jersey.
Don't.
I'm showing them. I'm a true fan, Blung.
True fan. You be a fan within the last 3 years. I was Giovanni Bernard jersey. Show him the Bengals jerseys, you coward.
I would. If I had it, I have no idea where it is.
True fan jerseys back there. You got a little brewski action in my closet.
Yeah, exactly.
This is where I'll kind of push back on that a little bit. Is while I agree, like, we just need a body that's meant to do it. Like, I mean, Kyle Duggar ended up getting put in situations he had no business being in as a coverage safety and graded out as one of the worst coverage players in the NFL last year. That's unacceptable. Can't happen. Same with Jonathan Jones. We put someone past his prime in a position to cover large kind of swaths of the field to no avail, especially when you're looking at a corner depth chart last year that was pretty egregious. And now, even if it's just the addition of Carlton Davis we're going to discuss, definitely provides a massive boost in that standpoint. Like, that's why I'm not saying we necessarily have to get that guy in the early third round. That might be perfect edge territory for the Patriots.
I think so.
But I do think we'd be kidding ourselves if we don't think that that's not a position you need to draft over the next year and a half, because it's just it was, I think, from a play standpoint, the worst position we had on defense might have truly been coverage safety, not box
I would
safety.
say
Coverage safety. It was that bad, dude. It was that bad. Edge was bad too, but I think they're like I'm going based off like PFF grade, so pardon me for being trying to be a little bit of a nerd here, but like Kyle Duggar looked like he didn't belong on an NFL field at times last year. And I went on multiple rants on this platform talking about it. And I think you had given him a little bit of not like a pass, and I think you were partially right, because the injury, I think, that came out later in the season ended up probably being a little more impactful than we thought. But most importantly, it's because he's playing out of position. He had no business being there. And whether or not it was the ego of Mayo and Covington, or just straight up, we need to fill this spot, and that this is one of the best players on our roster, so get up there. I have more faith in you than whatever undrafted rookie or training camp guy I could throw out there. Sometimes, just the body's not going to do it. But damn, it also meant that we didn't have Duggar in positions of strength and need. So for me, while getting a free safety is important just for having that center fielder back there that's going to be able to, coordinate with the secondary at to some level and just have a working relationship, it also just helps open up these guys like Pepper and Duggar that don't belong in positions where they can be exposed, which is the entire story of last year, which is why a defense that I think on paper going into the season people thought might be top 15. Now, I think looking back on it, we should have looked at our secondary or at the secondary holes past Gonzo and been like, probably not, and looked at an aging Jonathan Jones and been like, probably not. But we still had guys that Belichick had managed to get top 15 level defenses out of year in, year out, just completely collapse. And I do think part of that rests on the shoulders of the coaching staff. Not trying to say Bill would have gotten us to a 10-win season last year or anything. I think Bill, from a managerial standpoint, had really kind of worn his welcome out, and there was no path forward where he gives up power that way. It just wasn't going to happen. And that's why we're seeing him in college now, because that's where he probably could get the most power. As much as I want to see him break the coaching record, as much as I want to see him in the NFL every Sunday, I really do think and for better or for worse, he sees his style of management and coaching is probably a product of the bygone era of the NFL. And with this new Wild West that is NIL and college programs and all, I think he sees an ability to kind of reach his meaty fist in there and kind of, take a program by the balls, which is kind of what he's doing right now.
Well, it's really his girlfriend, if we're being honest, but
yeah, kind of. I mean, you think Bill Belichick doesn't have Wheezy on speed dial? How else you got Lil Wayne out there in Chapel Hill?
No, that's the thing. He and Wheezy. I can't even talk about Bill. Bill is not. Bill is dead to me.
Carter 6 coming out June 6th. You heard it here first, folks. Get ready.
That's pretty cool with the 6 month, 6 day thing. It's good for him, man.
He's so excited. Greatest. As someone that listens to a lot of varying different types of music, the greatest series of albums in I don't know what to call it, but albums that are connected by the best. Doesn't get any better. No,
I agree.
The Cotters. Come on now.
No, I don't even like talking about Bill anymore.
I didn't want to make this a Bill conversation because inevitably it becomes it kind of devolves into kind of a petty thing, and I love what Bill did for us, so I don't really necessarily want to talk about it from a
we need to be honest and objective, and then he's probably not.
But also it's 4 years can't make me. That's kind of what I have with Bill, and it was frustrating at the end, but I'm not going to be a guy that somehow sustained 20 years of excellence. Granted, with the greatest quarterback of all time, but still, I mean, his defenses were just some of the smartest, most cutthroat on the edge of the rule book. They knew how to do everything early and often, and you know how many times that the Patriots influenced rule changes because someone in the Ravens, when you're doing an eligible receiver play with a tackle or something, or some bullshit Colts thing, those people went and bitched to the league so many times and got so many rules changed because Belichick was yeah, I know how I can exploit that, and it's legal now, so stop it. But again, neither here nor there. This is a pre-draft spectacular, and this isn't the Bill hour, or
Well,
definitely not the Jordan, whatever her last name is, hour.
Jordan Hudson, baby.
Jordan Hudson. Yeah.
Bridgewater State University.
The fact that her name is spelled with an O infuriates me.
No, I agree.
I don't. That's the part that gets me the most.
Learned that yesterday. Her
Jordan
Instagram handle
Hudson.
is Jordan, and I think that's really funny.
Anyway, I wouldn't mind Dylan Sampson or Caleb Johnson in the late second round. What are your thoughts? I'm not totally against a late second running back as much as we just talked about how there's no value in trading for a running back in the early first. I kind of like maybe more of an early. Maybe I'm looking more actually. Again,
It's
trading
second
and
round.
Quinson Judkins. I don't mind third round. Maybe an RJ Harvey.
I think if you wait past that. If Judkins makes it to 38 or Henderson by some miracles,
He's
I think Jaden
Blue on a big board. That's an interesting one.
4th round pick on him, dude. I'd be very interested.
That speed, I concur with. So I'm not opposed to that. He's just there's some fumbling issues, maybe not as physically imposing, but that's kind of a Ramondre. I'm not going to talk about him being a better, non-fumbler, but I will say that Jaden Blue, I think when you use him in the right spaces could really complement that well. So I'm actually not opposed to that, just seeing the way the board shakes out. Some people talked about Trevor Etienne as well.
Sonic.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Might be have some more pass catching, I think, versatility there. Although, again, I think let's wait and see what we get out of Antonio Gibson. But I think those are some cool names to keep on the radar from a running back standpoint. And then, but this is
I
one
agree.
that
I think
we really haven't touched
second
on.
round edger.
Yeah, as you said, this is one of the most important things that we could address because of the way there's depth in this draft class, and that's maybe how we can attack edge in the second or third round. And it's probably not going to be Azaraku, even James Pierce. I wouldn't even watch James Pierce, to be honest, for this team, or even a Nick Scorton. Yeah. But Shamar Stewart's getting projected way higher than I think he maybe should based on production, but solely based off freak physical attributes. But again, I think that's not necessarily a luxury the Patriots can take right now. That might be more of a team with an established edge and pass rush set. So Michael Williams, Landon Jackson, Braden Swinson, CFB GOAT. This is when you're going to start hearing names you remember is when you get into like the Princely Uman-Mielen territory, Mississippi guy. And a lot of these guys tend to be those hybrid outside linebacker edge rush positions, which essentially is just what Abdul Carter graduated into being a strict edge, but has a lot of positional versatility there that maybe isn't talked about enough because he kind of took over that edge rush role this year. But it's something that there's a lot of value to addressing in the draft. Whether or not that's like a Oladejo, UCLA guy.
He's good, interesting.
And you and I think, are probably pretty out on Josiah Stewart, and that might just be entirely video game bias. But
he's Keon White to me. I've said it before.
That's why I'd rather take an Oladejo. Those guys were like 75, 76 on the big board. Nothing separating them from a pure, physical standpoint like that. I would, as you said, I'd go with the guy that offers the explosion, a little bit of that quick release. Like Josiah Stewart is, I think, without even getting into the fact that he's like, what do they call it? Like, he's not size-wise, I think, ideal for the position right now, especially when you're looking at a team like the Patriots that was like hey, we could get Abdul Carter with the first overall pick, and now we're like, well, we're not getting either Carter or Hunter. So it's kind of, I don't know. Kyle Kennard, another name thrown around a lot, South Carolina.
Wouldn't hate that.
Intelligent pass rusher, not bad. Good footwork, hand movements. Yeah. These are all important things. So if we're going to look at taking, that would be essentially in like the late third round, which again, there is value there because I don't know if it's going to play out this way, but they have guys like Jack Sawyer, big board, 92, Kyle Kennard, 81, and that's Jordan Birch at 99. Like there's some guys from real solid programs that I think had good tape that you can get at edge later in this draft than pretty much any other position.
Running back.
That's just the way this draft is. And that's true. It's running back and edge for sure. That's why you and I are kind of Like in the third, maybe even fourth round, if you get a Jaden Blue and a Jack Sawyer, that's a great haul in the middle of the draft. At least from like a perspective standpoint of the way you can help positions that are the weakest on your roster, for sure.
No, and I think if you use that model where it's like, all right, the talk about tackle at the beginning of the draft is the same with basically every other position as you move farther down, whereas wide receiver kind of dies off. Like there's nobody that you can get that really even plays a role after the second round, if you ask me. Like maybe Trey Harris falls into the third round, but even he has that prototypical size and speed that I think is going to make him really attractive. Maybe Jaden Higgins, but
Does he have
as
the
we've
speed?
said, he's
Trey
fast.
Harris,
Dude. I mean, he's probably like 4.4. I couldn't tell you, but I've seen him play enough to maybe it's just the Ole Miss play calling where it's just vertical.
Jackson Dart throw it 70 yards downfield.
And I think there's something attractive to that in that Kayshon Boutte role that we've said where it's just like, all right, just distract it, clear it out for an out route, clear it out for a dig underneath, clear it out. Just get that space open. I think you have somebody like that already. And I don't think it's not worth upgrading. I think Trey Harris is an upgrade, but I think if you get past that and you can the one exception I'll say is if you can get a Travion Henderson or a guy that really moves the needle at running back there. But I don't think
not opposed to.
No, I'm not opposed to either, but I don't think they make it to 38. And I like as we went over earlier, I don't think it's good for us to really be talking about. They're going to make some trades, but I don't see the point in us trying to predict it.
No, the predictive element of it is kind of bull. The reason why I think maybe you and I like the idea of getting an explosive running back in there is because in theory, if you do get Will Campbell and maybe you attack another guard or tackle somewhere in there, but even if you don't, I think your offensive line is already much better than it was last year. How do you kind of help an offensive line and a quarterback beat defenses, especially when you're not known for having separators, is if you have versatility in the run game. And, with a better offensive line, we might be able to, have sustainability in that run game past week like 4 or whenever it was that Ramondre basically was like, I've just taken like 16 weeks worth of hits in a month. You can run some great play action in boots, and you got a guy in Drake May that, first of all, his as we've talked about, his arm strength, his ability to throw off platform, the mechanics are all there. Like he can sling it. So him in the boot, I'm very comfortable in. Him in play action sets, like I like that a lot. And I think that does open up ability. Maybe you win some leverage battles at the line or maybe, depending on coverage down the field, like you can scheme guys like a Pop or even a Booty or a Bourne and Diggs, obviously. Like these guys can get open the more that your run game is imposing. And the problem was our run game fell off a cliff. And so there was absolutely no no team really had to commit too much to it to where it helped Drake May on the back end. And it became unsustainable towards the end of the year. And that's when you're looking at Drake getting concussions and getting hits because he's having to, displaying his intelligence, like reading, the leverage defensively and being like, I can just rip this for a 30-yard run. Exactly. Your sideline or something, which is great to have. But it's also nice to have like a run game that can punch you in the mouth and then, allow for Drake May. Because I still want to see a lot of Drake May in shotgun. Like I'm not necessarily wanting to turn him into Kirk Cousins. Like let's be real about that. But you also need versatility offensively, and there was just none. So if you get a speed back to pair with Ramondre, I think you have a good 1-2 punch. And then Antonio Gibson, I think could be ideal on like third down. So maybe Antonio Gibson's like just a third down guy. Like what is the phrase people keep saying? Like early down back. They're like there's very specific. Back. No, but sure. But there's like a thing people have talked about in the early Belichick years where it's like early down, short down backs. Like I'm just regurgitating stuff I hear on the radio. So let me not waste too much time doing that. Especially when I, for some reason, had Trey Harris's combine numbers here that I pulled up because we were talking about him. He has an athletic score of 72, which isn't terrible. But he ran a 4.54. So nice.
Oh! Yeah. That's slow. We don't need that.
38.5, broad at 10.5, 10-yard split, 1.56. Yeah,
see, we don't need that. Unfortunate to say, but
it's basically like he's as fast measurable wise as Tet McMillan. However, Tet McMillan, I think, silkier, play speed, probably faster. Although Trey Harris on the side, like I think, again, play speed can render some combine numbers null and void. Not all of them, but some of them. So we'll kind of wait and see. But again, I don't see enough like after the catch. And again, I know this is maybe something I harp on, but that's why you take a Tet McMillan with those measurables over a guy like Trey Harris. That's why Tet McMillan is going in the first round and Trey Harris might be a third round player. These are the margins I think a lot of these guys deal with.
No, and to kind of go back to something that you had, and it's not the same idea, but it definitely is along the same lines where you're talking about the play action game and having a lot of versatility. I think something that they did not do a good job of was, and I was definitely vocal about it on here with the RPOs and the play calling sequencing. I think if you're able to let Drake May be the playmaker back there and decide what he thinks is best on any given snap, it makes it easier for your running backs, your offensive line, your play caller, and most importantly, your freaking wide receivers who are not that talented at getting open. Yeah. And if you can use those and you can attack the sideline and spread the field out and then hit it with a run up the middle, or Drake keeps it and he picks up 5 or now we're getting into a little bit more downhill and we're lining up because we're having success in the run game and the guys are just getting a good push up front. Bang, little handoff, little duo call. And I think there is something to knowing that Josh is going to be bringing in this dynamic play calling and maybe not dynamic, but like methodical and calling the right plays at the right moment and giving Drake the freedom to, at the line, hopefully be able to one day just, you know what, I'm not liking what I'm seeing. We're changing this, but maybe that's just wishful thinking.
No, I mean, this is why, we have to talk ourselves out of, I think, making premature splash. Like, again, like, not that there's anything wrong with getting that, I think, prime receiver, which we didn't really do with Stephon Diggs. He's older, but I still like, what he can provide to a team. But there's an argument to be made for going out and getting the Stephon Diggs to your Josh Allen, right? There's also an argument that they haven't been past the AFC Championship game in 6-7 years, and a lot of that comes down to the way that they've next to McDermott, but Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So we really got to hammer home the interior. I know I'm not trying to follow along with the narrative. Well, the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, and they have the best trench play in the NFL. So we have to do exactly what the Eagles did. Not true. I think you can have serviceable teams. The Chiefs have done it numerous times that do not have the best offensive line on the field. They have one of the best athletes at quarterback on the field, which I think if you're a wishful thinking Patriots fan, we can eventually have that as well. So we don't need to be, number one in pass block win rate, right? Or rush win rate. All these things that I think can be statistically important. However, you need to have competence and good coaching. And we're kind of a long ways off from establishing both of those things. I think maybe not as far as we were 7 months ago when I was like, well, I guess Gerard Mayo's coming back next year. And what that means for the team, I genuinely don't know. And that's before we had what I think was about as good a free agency window as you can really have in the NFL. Like, if we're being honest, some people might have wanted more. I really don't know what else you could have gotten out of it. We kind of, like, getting a guy like Spillane, spending what we did on Milton Williams, like, we took the shots we needed to take. And those shots weren't offensive, and I know that can, frustrate people. But a lot of those guys that were available offensively were not nearly as good as the defensive counterparts. Like, I mean, we wasted a lot of time talking about tackles that no one wanted, like that spent weeks, months without being signed. And read the tea leaves. Like, you got to know the guys that people want to invest on in their team. And we got some guys that filled some important holes defensively to where I think we're closer to being able to make those, those nice, like, toppers defensively. Now, we need to have more consistency at edge before I think we just get guys that are just pure, like, plus, like, we have a solid defense, so let's go take some swings. We're not there yet. But we're damn close, and a lot closer than some of the other teams that are drafting alongside us defensively in the first, like, 5, 6, 7, 8 picks in the NFL. Because the first like 9 picks in the NFL draft are all with guys that had like 4 or less wins. Like there's a lot of bad teams in the league last year. It's a weird year. You had a couple dominant ones, but you had some bad teams. And I think that we started off on the right foot with under Vrabel. I really do think we did, even if maybe our offense won't be as good as we like or as supportive of Drake May as I think both of us would, have idealized going into the offseason. But in reality, I was fooling myself a little bit to think we were just going to come away with, immediately A.J. Brown, or we were going to get T. Higgins and Diggs or something like that. Like you kind of you have to take your medicine. And as much as it sucks we missed out on Higgins, I also don't necessarily want to be in the Bengals position where, I want to have Higgins, Chase, and Burrow, which is probably the best trio in the league. But like defensively, they're so porous. They're incredibly mismanaged. They're one of probably the stingiest historically ownership groups in the NFL. Like, I know we're a 4-win team picking 4th in the NFL draft, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we are in a better position than a lot of these other teams because we have Drake May and because I think we have a serviceable defense.
No, I completely agree. I think it'd be dumb for us to get impatient. And today on Unfiltered, I said it earlier that somebody was like, "What would you give up to get Travis Hunter?" Nothing. Like you kind of have to be patient right now. You gotta build the foundation. I think, not to say that it's stupid for the Browns or the Giants to go out and get those blue chip players, but they're also falling into their lap. And if you want to make the argument for Genti, I think you can. There's a reason why those guys are passing on Genti. You know what I mean? Like that, the talent that they're gonna get is definitely better than what you're gonna get out of Genti. No offense, I think he's a great player, but now you have to build the team up before you go try and put these pieces in. And maybe it's not an edge player, or maybe it's not an X receiver, but it's a stud tight end, or it's a stud free safety who makes a bunch of plays, or it's a great middle linebacker who can go out there and set the tone. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but you got to build up to that point. And I think next year, if you want to talk me into, I don't know, maybe it's name X receiver who's unhappy in their destination this week, and we'll try and make a play. And I think you're in a much better place to attract them, but also to have success. I don't think the team right now, there's a reason that we've picked 3rd and 4th in consecutive years. So
yeah, for sure. I know initially, once I think it was pretty solidified that we weren't going to get Travis Hunter a few weeks ago, and it was all right, we were kind of just jerking your chain with all this Shadur Sanders being a top 4 player. Part of me was I'm so in on Travis Hunter that I would try to trade up and get him. And then the immediate thought is, then you're pretty much handcuffed to not bolster the weakest part of your entire roster, which is left tackle right now. So as fun as it would be, once you sign Stephon Diggs, you really can't make a rational argument to trading up and taking Travis Hunter, because then you're there's probably no chance you're keeping 38. I just don't know how that happens. Probably because in this draft, outside of obviously those guys, which maybe you can attract a little bit more compensation and value from, it's you're not going to want to trade futures, because the futures have more value than this year's draft. They just do, based on the talent pool that we're dealing with this year.
Exactly.
So, and if we're losing 38, or even if we keep it, but then we've lost picks in the middle of the draft that would help you maybe package 38 to move back up and take a guy like Josh Connerly, I think that you probably missed on tackles this draft. Once you do that, once you trade up for Hunter, you are not getting a top 5 tackle this draft, and that's crippling. That's genuinely a break glass in case of emergency situation. We are screwed. We are effed. And I'm not willing to make that sacrifice for a year that, let's face it, we're not making the Super Bowl. Now, I'm not going to be as demonstrative as I was months ago when I said we're not making the playoffs next year, because since then we've signed Vrabel, and we've limited, I think, Elliott Wolf's sole power managerially up there in the front office, and we've made some great signings in the offseason. So this has gone the best it could have possibly gone. a lot like that than
Agreed.
if we had signed Ben Johnson, right? Like maybe you can make an argument. I still think maybe our first year with the team we have, our floor is higher with Vrabel because with Ben Johnson, you want to have more pieces. So that's why Ben made sense for the Bears and Vrabel made sense for us at that moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
If we were a team that had, better offensive skill talent, then you could make an argument that Ben Johnson would have made more sense. But I think like in this, the year of our Lord, 2025, January, when it came down to those two guys, they went to the two spots that made the most sense for them. Just from
Agreed.
a purely like logistical standpoint, it made the most sense. I thought up until a couple weeks left in the season that there was no way that Kraft would fire his surrogate son Mayo after a year. And that to me put a cap on how far this 2025 season would go. Like, it seriously kind of cut us off at the knees. We're not dealing with that scenario anymore. So that doesn't scare me as much. And I think like I have more hope than I did in December, like by a lot. I mean, watching like those Chargers games, the Cardinals, like it was just bad football. And, Joe Milton highlights be damned. We were a bad football team. And one you can make an argument was the worst in the NFL. And we're going to be picking as such up until, the week when the Bills, had no incentive to win. Let's see. I think, we've done a pretty good job setting the table for the draft. At the end of the day, it is all talk. And we're really going to find out stuff probably like by 5 o'clock tomorrow. You're going to get some more, I think, solidified information because a lot of those teams kind of want it to leak because then they can be like, all right, you know who I'm taking. You want your guy. You better pay me more than you were willing to 2 weeks ago. And maybe you get some draft day jitters from these guys that for months had told themselves, don't trade up, don't trade up, don't trade up. It's not the draft. It's not worth it. We're not going to get the guy that can help our team. It's commensurate with the value that we're going to spend in trading for him. Maybe on the draft day, people get antsy. These guys are professionals that have been in the league for a long time. They've been in front offices. They've been in coaching staffs for years. It's hard to not give them the benefit of the doubt. But at the same time, the New York Jets are in the NFL, right? So
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, the New York Jets are in the NFL, right? So things change. Things happen. So I'm not willing to write off anything other than Will Campbell coming to the Patriots at 4 overall. Because I think I'm locked in.
Happening.
You're locked in. Fuck, hell, I'd buy a Will Campbell jersey if I could, dude.
That would be a little bit excessive for me considering, but
dude, he's a dog. He's a leader. He's
yeah,
he's got a lot of
he's a
intangibles.
beast.
Let's see how the physical aspect works out. And I'll be honest, I think I'm in the minority here, but the worst case scenario with him is that he's a left guard. That's, I think, the worst case scenario. And at the end of the day, we don't have a left guard either. So
yeah,
really you're
and we're just in the same boat. Yeah.
Which more than Tyler Warren, because we don't need a tight end this year. We don't
need a running back.
Need Jalen Walker this year. We don't need Ashton Jensen this year.
Yeah.
We need a left tackle and we need a left guard. So I'm like that would suck, and we'd get blasted for it, and Elliott Wolf would probably lose his job if Will Campbell isn't the left tackle of the future. Long term, it's not going to be the thing that destroys Drake May's career and doesn't win us Super Bowls down the road. So I'm willing to kind of take the risk that comes with that if it means that we have solidified the worst side of the worst line in the NFL. Sue me.
No, I agree. All right, you got anything else?
No, man, I'm just excited. I'm not working tomorrow night, so I'm excited to sit back and just enjoy. It will be so anticlimactic because it has been months of this crap, but at the same time, I do love watching a draft, and I think the amount of time and energy we've invested in it, at least from passively watching other journalists invest time in it, I'm going to know a lot more when it comes to some of these mid-round guys and be just invested and interested in the draft itself rather than be kind of apathetic to it, which, as I think most Patriots fans can attest to, it didn't really matter during the later stages of the dynasty. We're like, we're going to pick 31 and we're going to take a D tackle or a guard, and no one's going to care. That happened frequently. We had your Malcolm Browns. Clearly, you had your Cole Stranges. You had your Isaiah Wynns. Every once in a while, a Sony Michel or N'Keal Harry would kind of squeeze in there. It very rarely moved any needles. Tom Brady moved needles. So let's enjoy what is our first, I think, serious non-quarterback draft in terms of building for the future in a long time. The draft's not great. We all know this. But I think we can come together and be excited in the fact that we're building pieces around like a guy that we think is our future. And we have not felt that way since 2019, like fully. Like if you want to say you bought into Mac Jones, sure. I don't think any of us were ever as confident as we were in Drake May right now.
Not like this.
No, because he's physically
At best,
gifted.
I thought he was a net neutral. Yeah.
Every top quarterback in the NFL is physically gifted right now. Outside of, you could argue, Jared Goff, right? That's in Matthew Stafford, but even then, like Matthew Stafford has arm talent at the wazoo.
Still, yeah,
but we know the blueprint. The blueprint isn't, well, we all have to go over trenches because the Eagles just won the Super Bowl, or we all need a Tyreek Hill because that helped, the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. Or we all need a Travis Kelce who's just a pure pass catching tight end. All that stuff's great. The blueprint is having that athletic quarterback that wins you games and extends drives and plays and has talent play up to him rather than him playing, up to his talent, right? And that's what we potentially have, knock on wood, right now. So let's get to work. Let's enjoy it.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys after the draft.
This has been ExPats.